You know what I love about the slow thought movement is that it's based around simplicity. There's no one telling us what to think, how to think. It's simply an invitation to return to self, to go back to the essence of who you are, not somebody's prescribed formula as to who you should be or what you should behave in terms of, or defining the content of one's thoughts. And even though what's funny is sometimes when I'm explaining this phenomenon to people, it definitely plays on, it seems contradictory, because on one level it's called a slow thought movement, and yet I always tend to emphasize that it really doesn't have so much to do with thought. Because as you know, thought is really, it's more of a shallow level of experiencing life. It's essential on many levels, and yet it doesn't really cut to the depth of how we can experience who we are. It's simply what I call a very simplified dimension of being. And so the slow thought movement, eventually if it gets slow enough in your head and in your being, you'll realize that there's much more to who we are than thought itself. What I find nowadays is that the more I talk about awareness, the more I begin to realize is that maybe I'm speaking a language that not everybody's tuned into. And so I want to spend some time, and you'll find in many of the videos to come, that I'm really going to elaborate on the nuances of awareness, because when I ask anyone, and sometimes I've done this in the group, is just simply ask the question, what is awareness? And invite each person to offer what comes to them. Of course, we get many different definitions, which is all wonderful and provides fresh insight for us all to consider. And at the same time, I find that there's so much more to awareness that we're not even scratching the surface of. And so, to prevent oversimplification, and when you use a word often enough, sometimes the group itself begins to think, and all the people using it begins to think we really know what we're talking about. And we can often lose touch with the essence, the phenomenon that we're actually referencing in our discussions. So we're talking about awareness, and yet we lose sight as to what really awareness is. And that's what I definitely don't want myself to make a mistake, and anyone who's equally concerned over the matter. So let me touch on a specific nuance today, and I really think there are a lot of filters, and I've tried to emphasize them, and I'm going to keep emphasizing them, because not only is repetition the law of learning, but it's also the law of awareness. The more you bring to your attention certain things going on inside you, the more acutely aware you become of them as you practice your own self-awareness. So that's critical. So I will repeat. And for the sake of repetition again and emphasis, there's a lot of filters that occur. When we're experiencing something, when we're in certain experience, in a certain state, there's certain things that prevent us to going deeper and deeper. So what I mean is, we have ideas of what things are. We have perceptual biases, judgments. We may meet somebody for the first time and yet immediately have some conditioned response to who they are, perhaps by how they look, dress. And again, we may not even be consciously thinking about it, and often we're not. It's unconscious stuff that's going on. So how do we really confront this? How do we really work on these filters that are concealing a direct experience of things? How do we do it? I want to offer a few suggestions. Now, definitely not to have the final word on the matter, but here are some of my thoughts on how it really works when you're practicing awareness and you really want to work on something. Well, let's say you observe, you become aware of yeah, there is something working on here, going on. I remember I was in a silent meditation retreat, and when I came to that retreat, I didn't have an opportunity to actually talk to any of the other people present, because it was in silence, of course, right? So, but I had all sorts of conditioned judgments of how people were going on in my head, in my being, throughout those days of silence. And it wasn't until I had the opportunity, when we broke the silence, to talk to the people present who was participating in this retreat with me, side by side, when I actually spoke to them, I began to realize, wow, boy, did I have it all wrong. Most of the time, 99.9% of the time, all the internal judgments, unconscious prejudices going on in my being, they were all inaccurate. I mislabeled everybody on conscious and unconscious levels. And that really made me aware of the fact that a lot of things going on beneath the radar. So how do we confront all these filters? How do we work on them without creating further denial and suppression to the act of actually working on it? It's a very delicate matter. So you see, like for example, when you become aware of something, it's very easy to judge it and go, oh my God, I want to get rid of it. You see something that is unhealthy, so naturally you want to heal it. But how you begin to approach it now, once you become aware of something unhealthy, is really critical.